Today, we are going to be doing a celeb art critique of John Lennon's art. If you are looking to strengthen and flex your art muscle, our Prof is the community for you. We have tutorials, critiques, and more, and it's all for free. So Clara, for the people that don't know who John Lennon is, could you give us a little bit of a background on who John Lennon is and maybe a little bit about their artwork?
I feel like you just asked me to describe the history of music. So much to talk about because he's such a legend in history as a musician, and there really has not been anybody like him. I mean, there probably won't ever be somebody like him. So if you don't know about John Lennon, he really had multiple phases in his music career, because in the beginning, he was with the Beatles. And the Beatles were so cute and British and fun and clean. And so people just went gaga over them. But the thing is, the Beatles went through so many different transformations, not just musically, but also in terms of their image. And tell us in the chat, what's your experience with John Lennon or the Beatles? Were you alive when he was shot in, I think it was 1980 or something like that? Or is he just somebody you sort of know about a little bit? Because I think depending on your age, you probably have a pretty different perception of who he was. I mean, I was like 4 when he got shot. I think you were not born, right, Deepti?
No, I wasn't born. And actually, we have a comment from Neil Espinoza saying, I'm a young fart. I don't know stuff about John Lennon. So we were laughing before this stream, being like, it's kind of silly explaining who John Lennon is, but there are some people who don't know a lot about John Lennon.
Well, so the other thing about him is I do feel like his marriage to Yoko Ono, that was such a big part of the second half of his life, because he was very strongly associated with the Beatles. But Yoko Ono, I feel so bad for her because people really blame her for breaking up the Beatles. I'm like, come on, they were a band for so long. All bands break up at some point, and yet people really point the finger at her. And the two of them had such an intense relationship, as far as she was a contemporary artist. She did a lot of performance art and conceptual art. And in all these images, you can see how important their relationship was, just in their lives as artists. And Neil is asking, wait, he is shot? Yeah, Deepti, explain what happened, because he died when he was 40.
Yeah, it was a pretty high profile situation where I think it was like, it wasn't a fan. It was kind of like someone who, maybe a fan, but someone who was a little bit, I think, very aware of his life and, but not super happy with how he was leading his life. But it was basically a murder that happened, I believe, in the lobby of a hotel in New York. Yoko was there. She witnessed it happen, and it was, a very premature death. And I believe at that point they had a child together, right, Clara?
Sean Lennon. And actually, John Lennon had another son, Julian Lennon, from a previous relationship. And I believe Sean Lennon is a musician now. Maybe somebody can tell us about that. But yeah, I mean, we get a lot of comments here about Yoko, and Casey is saying, I know more about Yoko than John Lennon because I'm currently in art school. That's so interesting, because I feel like I grew up with the Beatles and John Lennon, and so I don't see it that way, but depending on who you are. And BV is saying it's very unfortunate that Yoko Ono took so much of the weight of everything. She's an incredible artist. Yeah, people really were not kind to her as an artist.
Yeah, and this comment from Ciro Lean says, I never realized she's actually a respected artist. I always thought people saw her as a lightweight until I went to art school. And I actually had a similar, like, I only knew her as like this, spot on the Beatles like track record. And I didn't even know she was an artist. And then I went to art school and was like, oh my God, she makes this really profound, like impactful, intense artist, and is a very serious artist. But like it's sad like how tainted her image and her reputation and just her entire vibe has been because of the whole John Lennon situation. So
we're going to look at a bunch of drawings by John Lennon, and there's a lot of them. Like, I had no idea how much work he actually produced. And during his lifetime, he really did not show these very much. I mean, we've done other celebrity art critiques, like we did one on Anthony Hopkins a long time ago, and he's had gallery shows and other people have had their stuff up at auction. But from what I was able to get online, this really was a private set of drawings. And Yoko Ono has been trying to put them out there, right, Deepti?
Yeah, I believe that after his death, one of his wishes, or, you know, when he was dying, one of his wishes, or maybe before he was dying, I don't really know, but one of his wishes for his legacy was to have his art be a little bit more public. So that was something that she worked really hard to do. And I bet is continuing to do, but it was post his death, I think, that his art really became something that was public. But I actually really like his art. I'm like so drawn to it. I think there's such a childish kind of playfulness and nature to it. And it's so simple, but like this one, Clara, don't you feel like it really just gets to the essence of him?
I think it looks exactly like him, which is crazy because there's 15 lines in this whole drawing. And he's such a distinctive person, but I'm with you. I love this work. I find it so intimate and playful and deeply personal, doesn't it? I mean, it's not flashy. It's not like some giant mural or something like that, but I really appreciate work like this. What about you?
I do too. And I think like during all of our celeb critiques, we kind of talk about intent a lot of the time. And like his work doesn't seem like things that he felt very like, okay, I'm going to make this and put it out in the world. And, you know, it feels like really intimate. Like even this one, I really wish I had known what was going through his mind when he was making this. Like, I feel like these are one of those like how I am feeling today kind of like drawings. And it reminds me so much of like my sketchbook and just like a really like for me, it feels like a healthy way of like doing some self-analysis. Like, I don't know, it feels so intimate. And I love that like it's kind of something that is coming out past his death. Okay, I don't love that he died. That sounded weird. But like, it's cool that you are seeing this like after his death, and it felt like a private thing that he was creating while he was alive. But now we're getting to spend time with it. Don't you kind of feel that way?
Yeah, I think that it's really nice to discover this because we're seeing a whole other side of him through these drawings. Because, I mean, I was not an adult when he had his full-out fledged career and everything, but I mean, he's a major person in like human history. Like, I'm not just talking music history. He's definitely somebody that had a huge impact on the world.
Scott Giley says something about the little smile is really nice to me and it makes the entire portrait. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, it's almost like the smiles kind of look like the Nike swoosh. Like, it's so simple, but like it really makes the entire portrait. And this is like, in my opinion, quite obviously a family portrait. And like, it's so sweet. It's interesting how so much of his persona has to do with his love and his family. And I think that kind of like hits me right in the heart. Like, and I love that he makes so much work about that. Like, it really does warm my heart.
We have a comment from Slepnir who is saying John Lennon started going to art school. It's interesting. There are a lot of people don't know about that started going to art school. Like, didn't David Byrne go to RISD? I feel like he did.
Yeah,
anyway.
But I don't think he graduated. But yeah, I believe so. We have a comment from Ladamai Katoa that says, do you think if he was alive, his art would be out there? That's a really interesting question. Clara, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you hear about all these things about, oh, well, now the work is valuable because the person's not alive anymore. I mean, the stereotype of that is Van Gogh is like, oh, well, he died, and so now his stuff is really worth. I really think Van Gogh is an anomaly. I don't think that that's actually that common. I think most artists who are known in history, usually they are known in their lifetime. But I guess what's sort of charming about these is that it's something that is going beyond his life on the planet, that it's like now we're seeing, it's sort of like discovering somebody's old letters that they wrote to somebody in high school. And I do feel, looking at these, that they really are like love letters to Yoko Ono. What do you think?
I think so too. And like, it's amazing how much of a presence she has in his work. But I think it's undeniable also that like people feel a certain way, or like that you and I are feeling really like touched by a lot of his work or moved by a lot of his work because of the fact that his life was cut short, and because of the fact that they had such a high profile relationship. And I wonder if he was still alive, if these drawings would have that same kind of impact. You know what I mean? If they were still alive, and if he was still alive and they were still together, you know, it might be like really sweet to look at all of these drawings, but it might just be like, oh, you know, someone making a series of work about their relationship, but less so like this love letter, you know, this like really sad, painful situation, and like a really sweet reminder of their love. This piece I love. I love how like their bodies are one, essentially. Like, I think when I saw this, Clara, I told you, even the fact that he's kind of like looking at her, I mean, I assume it's them. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this piece?
I mean, he was a really good gesture artist. I consider all of these to be almost like gestural character designs, because he actually has a really good, I think, sense of line. Because what I like about this one is that if you look at how the line weight changes, like you see that really broad line that's like the right-hand side of her upper torso, like that line really carries a lot of weight. And you look at how her hair has so much presence, but then he sort of disappears into her body in the upper section. And so I really think he's very good at gesture drawing. What do you think?
I think so too. And I love that you're talking about them as gesture drawings, because Caroline, we have a comment from Caroline Chatfield that says, this looks like the kind of drawings I do of strangers at the mall, which is essentially a really quick gesture drawing. But I think so much of gesture drawing has to do with line weight and getting like really getting to the point in a quick fashion. But it's interesting that they resonate with gesture drawing so much, but they aren't really that, because it's of him and his wife, and obviously he couldn't watch this happen and create them. So they have the energy and the vibe of a gesture drawing, but it's very different in the process, which I think is kind of cool. And isn't this, Clara, a very iconic, like based off of an iconic image that they took together similarly?
Well, there's that Annie Leibovitz photo where she's wearing clothing and he's nude and he's hugging her. So it's sort of similar, but my feeling in this drawing is that they're both nude. It doesn't seem like he's wearing anything either. But I love seeing this, because I feel like, especially because we have that Anatomy for Artists series where I'm trying to teach everybody about anatomy and gesture drawing and all that stuff. This is such a good example of a gesture drawing that is not just naked person I'm drawing to practice, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's past just the gesture, and it's past just the practice of getting a quick sketch in. There's a whole narrative behind it. And like you said, he really captures the essence of him and Yoko. Like I love how Yoko's hair, just in general, especially during the time period when they were together, was very iconic. And he really taps into that. Like, you know, there's not a lot of marks, but the weight that he puts on her hair and giving her hair that kind of like triangular shape. Even here, there's 2 lines, I think, that make the hair, but like, it really gets to that.
We have a comment from Ibque. They are saying his art looks really childish. I think he was doing it more for fun, not for art's sake. Well, what do you think about calling something childish? Because for some people, that can be an insult. And for other people, it's like, oh, wow, that's the biggest compliment ever, because children have such a free way of seeing the world. So what's your take on that? Because I can see it going both ways.
I think the childishness comes from the simplicity and the energy and playfulness of his work. I subscribe to the mentality that having your art being called childish is actually something to be proud of. I get that a lot with my work, and I love it, because I think it just shows that there's less seriousness and weight to being put in your work, and you're having playtime. And I think I do agree. I think that his work has a childish nature to it, but also if I saw his work, I wouldn't think that a 5-year-old made it, because I do think there is a lot of thought and skill behind it. You know, it's not like he's a master that everyone should study this work, but I do think that you can tell that there is some thought and, you know, practice going into this. What do you think, Clara? Bless you.
I mean, I think what I like about this work is it just feels very honest. I don't feel that he's trying to put himself on a pedestal or act important. Like, I love this one so much. I don't know. It's really hard because we have a bunch of comments in here. People have differing opinions, which is great. I'm really glad to see that. Like Maria saying, looking at this without any of the weight that his name has, I would say, cool. There's just something that is missing to make me see this as something else than a sketch that is, quote, not there yet. Well, let's talk about that from what I was able to find. He didn't make full out artworks. He never made a painting on canvas that took hours and hours to make. He really never went beyond, from what I saw, quick sketches and gesture drawings. So does that mean he was less of an artist or not fulfilling his potential? Or is sketching enough? I don't know.
I don't know either, but I'm not like, when I look at his work, I don't crave that he like, oh, I really wish you explored like oil painting or something. I think he found a niche that he thrives in and really enjoys working in, and he's clearly doing a good job. And I remember when we like critique some other celebrities, I'm like, oh, I wish you really pushed this or tried this. And it feels like they're just scratching the surface. But I feel like because there's this intimate quality to them, I really do feel like we found his sketchbook and we're publicizing it, and it's a very intimate thing we're doing. I don't think it makes him any less of an artist the way that he's creating. I think he's just a very specific kind of artist, and he's doing it in a very intimate and personal way. And that feels right and good to me. What about you, Clara?
I mean, you also have to consider that he had other stuff going on. It's not like this was his only thing. But it brings up another thing, which is that I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of artists do practice other forms of art. I mean, Kat Huang and I had that stream about being a well-rounded artist. Kat is like an amazing classical pianist. Like, she's on fire when she plays the piano. I was a classical oboe player for many years. I played in an orchestra. And I was sort of the same thing in that I was never going to be a good oboe player professionally, but it still really fed my soul in a lot of ways. And I sort of feel like that's what we're seeing here.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm an actor too, and it's like you can't be a master at everything. And I think being a well-rounded artist really does help you in every facet of it. We have a comment from Sarah Lee saying, maybe viewed separately, they can seem like one-offs, but viewed as a whole, I think it's a body of work that makes him an artist and gives his work weight. I really agree. I didn't think of it as kind of like a series or as a whole, but there is so much emphasis and like more of an impact put into his work. I think seeing them all in a collection like this, Clara, don't you feel like there's like, it gives it a little bit more importance almost looking at them all like this?
I think for sure, because actually what you guys are seeing is such a small selection. If you guys look up his work, he made so many sketches. And I think that that's got to count for something, because some of the other celebrities that we've looked at, they don't really have that much work. And so it's actually harder to understand them because you don't see the range of what's out there in terms of what they've made. So I admire that. It seems like this is something he just was doing all the time. It doesn't seem like he just did it for a year and then quit. It seems like it was ongoing. By the way, this is my favorite one. Out of all the ones we're looking at, there's something about the facial expressions and how much contrast there is between the two. Like, he makes Yoko's face like really wide. I think that's really funny. And he's like very elongated compared to her. So I feel like she almost looks like a little mushroom and he's like this little tree. And I just find this one so charming. And again, like the bare feet, it's fabulous.
I love this comment that says it's very difficult to capture the essence of someone with just a few lines and to capture a feel and a relationship. And I think that one that we were just looking at and this one and just all of the ones of Yoko and John, like, it's so true. There's so few lines on paper and such few like intense details, but I do feel like their love and their like connectedness comes through in all of them. And especially there's more of an impact because we're looking at them kind of in this series sense.
Well, and also, I mean, I wasn't alive when their whole relationship was on view for the whole world to take apart. But I mean, can you imagine having such a high profile relationship like this? I mean, this seems like a little private space for him and his family. And I mean, I love the drawings that have Sean in them. This one has Sean at the bottom. And the fact that he makes Sean so tiny, I just love that. Because have you ever seen, I feel like I've seen these kids drawings where you ask a child to draw their family and they'll draw the mother as a gigantic head. And the other members of the family are like this big. My brother did a drawing like that when he was younger. And I just feel like that's so honest when you think about, okay, who is really such a big part of your life, right?
Yeah, that's such a good way to think about it. I didn't make that correlation, but Tammy has a comment that says his sketches remind me of Clara's daughter's t-shirt sketch for Art Prof. And I was like, that's actually like such a good comparison. Like, because our t-shirt, honestly, it does look like that. And I think the fact that it was your daughter that drew that and like the quickness and the fact that like it's of you and like that's such an interesting comparison to make because so much of his work is about family and these people that he knows so intimately.
Yeah, and I love this comment, Cerulean. They're saying, I really like how he uses fewer lines between their bodies. It really gives them a sense of closeness. This one especially, you almost can't figure out whose figure is whose. And do you see how they don't have necks? They don't have shoulders. And yet it does have this motion that keeps moving throughout the drawing.
Yeah, and I love the line weight, the thickness of Yoko's hair and the barefootness, like the fact that you can tell that they're barefoot just because of the one toe sticking out. Like I love that. And I just wanted to say thank you to Tom G for the super chat. This is so kind of you and it really helps Art Prof. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and so if you guys have not had a chance to practice some gesture drawing, we've got you covered, drawing cats. I've actually been drawing my sister-in-law's cat here, not cat, dog here in Utah. I got to share some of them on Instagram because I just love drawing animals. It's just so fun. But I would say gesture drawing to me, it's like, there's nothing more pure than that. Like to me, it's like the most distilled version of drawing that exists. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of like, it feels weird saying primal or animalistic, but I do think when you're doing gestural drawings, it's a lot about like the physicality of it and the energy of it. This is really funny. I remember Clara, when I was in your class freshman year university, I was very stiff one of the first days and you were like, get up, use your whole body. And you made me like stand up and just like go for it. And you were like, I want to see your shoulder move. And I was like using my whole arm. And it was these really quick like figure drawings that we were doing. And I was like, wow, it actually is like a very like physical and like animalistic thing almost to do these quick drawings. And it does kind of get to the core of what we are as artists. We're like seeing something, internalizing it, and then spitting it back out in like this really quick way and just getting to the essence. So that's kind of cool.
Moses is saying, I low-key am getting a little bit teary looking at his art. Why do you think we're having such an emotional response? Because like we said, these are very humble pieces that don't show very much technical skill or anatomical knowledge or none of that fancy stuff. And yet I had the exact same reaction that I was like, oh my God, he loved her. Like you can just be, why are we reacting like this?
It's because we're both lonely, Clara. No, just kidding. You're not lonely. No, I'm kidding. I think it's because, well, I think I've said this before, but I think that the fact that their relationship was so high profile, I think it's interesting to see like their perspective because so much of what I knew about their relationship and now Yoko was like through the tabloids. And part of it is just so sweet to see this intimate side of a really high profile, kind of sometimes nasty relationship. But again, it's like he and her, she, both of them were such huge public figures, but all of these pieces feel really relatable. Don't you feel that way? Like, I think it distills it down, like you said, just to like love and companionship and like adoration. And it's something that I think anyone, whether you're John Lennon or Yoko Ono or just like Deepti and Clara or whoever, you can still, I mean, I feel like this family image of sitting around the table with parents, I assume that like little tiny thumb of a person is Sean. That's so cute, so tiny. I'm obsessed with it. But I assume that's Sean. But I'm like, that's me, and those are my parents. You know, like I can understand this. Don't you feel like there's a part of you that you feel in some of his work?
I know the scene. This feels familiar to me because I remember when my first daughter, it was just her, and she was a baby. It really did feel this dramatic in terms of scale, because when you're a parent, you're so conscious of how big your kids are. You know, in the beginning, you're like, oh, I can hold you with one arm. And now they weigh like over 100 pounds. And it really does feel this dramatic sometimes. And by the way, this is a drawing, you can relate to it. Even if you don't know it's by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, it's still a story. It's telling a family narrative. And I just love that so much. And I like this comment from Moses, who's saying, I feel we don't see many artists making art about love in its most simple stages. It's hard to make artwork about love, don't you think, Deepti?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think there's like, when you're the artist and you're making artwork about your personal love life, it can be like really difficult to find out how to distill that into something digestible. And there's, you know, when you look at your relationship, or, you know, if it's platonic love, whatever, there's so many moving parts and there's so much intensity, but to make it into something that's like distilled into an image, it can be really hard. And it's like super personal and painful sometimes and like highly emotional. So I do agree that it's very difficult. And I think he's found a way to just make it really honest and sweet.
Yeah. And I also think when you make work about your relationship with somebody, there's the risk that you'll isolate your audience, and your audience will just go, oh, they're so-and-so with their partner, like who really cares? And also it can end up like a terrible Hallmark card, right?
Yeah. I like this comment from Maria Kilson because it says, if I think that a famous person drew this, I don't like it. But if I see it as artist registers like snapshots of a life with a partner, I find them charming. So it's interesting to view this through the lens of like giving it a hype because he was a celebrity and she was a celebrity versus just two people. I think that's a really interesting take on liking or disliking a piece. Thanks for sharing.
Let's take a look at some other artists who we think have similarities in their work. So let's start out by looking at some of these drawings by Henri Matisse. And I find these charming, but not so much in terms of the narrative, but more in terms of the style, because Matisse wasn't chronicling his own life. These are more images of figures, I think. I don't think they're meant to be particular people. So what do you think about these Matisse sketches? Because he did paint big oil paintings.
Yeah, I like them from a technical standpoint and from just like an image standpoint, but I agree that it's missing kind of the narrative aspect, which is really what draws me into John Lennon's. But I do see a lot of overlap just in the same kind of, like I said, material, mark making, and cerulean, which I admit it took me a long time to understand that it was cerulean. Sorry, I was saying cerulean for a long time. But they were talking about John's work and saying this is love, passion, parental love, family connections. And you can get all of that by looking at his like very simple work. And with Matisse's work, it's, you know, I don't really know who this person is. It almost seems like studies to me. And it feels very vague. How do you interpret them, Clara?
I think that they're very emotionally removed, actually. I think they're more a commentary on the visual of mostly female figures is usually what he was painting. But I think they're more just interesting design decisions. Like I actually like this portrait a lot because of the dramatic width. I mean, the strokes he's putting down, they almost look like snakes in a way. And so I enjoy it from a drawing point of view. but narratively not a lot going on, in my opinion. And actually, some of you guys probably saw our crit clash on the Giving Tree fairly recently. And I think Shel Silverstein is actually sort of similar to John Lennon in that it's really sparse, minimal images, but sort of quirky and flawed. What do you think?
I agree. And I think this image is particularly interesting because I love how John Lennon deals with hair, because both his hair and Yoko's hair was kind of like iconic. And Shel Silverstein also does really funny things with his fictional characters and their hair. But I do think like the line weight, the kind of like silliness, but simplicity, and just the play of both make a lot of sense to me. And I think it is interesting that both are like writers, like the fact that John Lennon was one of the songwriters for the Beatles and Shel Silverstein is a poet. It's kind of undeniable that there's some overlap there. And I wonder, Clara, if that has anything to do with it. Like, that might be a reach, but what do you think?
Well, I think it's clear that Matisse wasn't trying to tell a narrative story. I mean, I think Matisse just had a whole other set of agenda. I don't think he was out to tell the story of a lion that learned how to shoot a gun, which is what's happening here in Shel Silverstein's imagery. I mean, Shel Silverstein is a lot more kooky in a way, and I think he's trying to be more humorous. I think John Lennon's work is more about the rawness of that relationship, because things are never that perfect, right? Things are always a lot more flawed. And then another person who I just love, and this could just be nostalgia, is Quentin Blake. Some of you guys might know him. He's famous for illustrating all those books by Roald Dahl. And he does do a lot of stuff in color, but I love his pen work. Are you familiar with his work? Did you grow up with these books? I don't know.
I kind of know it in conjunction with Roald Dahl, but I literally thought of this artist when I saw the sides for John Lennon's work. I think the hair, like maybe the hair is just something that I'm really transfixed on, but especially this image, like the hair in Yoko and this like, I don't know, it's so simple, but I really like it. And there's one image of John Lennon's that has color. It's like early on we showed it, and there's a balloon, and it really reminds me of this because the color even in that is so saturated. You know, there's not a lot of like mixing. It's very just like straight out of the tube. So I like that. I like the impulse of it. But yeah, it's really beautiful making these comparisons.
Yeah, this is actually an illustration from the BFG, which is the Big Friendly Giant. And I mean, I think this is so painterly and beautiful. I mean, some people might look at it and say, oh, well, look at the values. It's so low in contrast. And I'm like, yeah, but this is a scene of him sneaking around the town late at night. And so it's supposed to have that feeling. So I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite, Deepti, because we're now showing pieces that go against all the things I'm usually pushing. Like, I'm always like, don't do a white background. Make sure you have a broad range of values and contrast. And so we're looking at people who are not doing any of those things. So, yeah, hard.
Mean Mr. Walrus says, you're absolutely right. Lennon wrote nonsense poetry with silly illustrations in his poetry books in his own right, and A Spaniard in the Works. I actually am not familiar with either of those books. Are you, Clara?
No, I've never heard of those before. I didn't realize that he did any of that, actually. So
but it would be
really cool.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to look at those and see what, like, how he pairs poetry and writing with his illustrations, and maybe if there is any overlap with like the Shel Silverstein aesthetic and playfulness.
And by the way, you guys, we do have this really fun tutorial. It's actually one of our like old tutorials from a ways back. Casey Roonan, who was with us for a long time, he does this really fun tutorial where he basically draws himself over and over again as a cartoon entirely from his imagination. And I do think a lot of people think about drawing from imagination as this like, ooh, free flow, anything goes. But Casey's take on it is so analytical. It's really, really cool. I really recommend that you guys take a look at this tutorial because I just was so floored by how strange his process was. It's really, really cool. I do want to look at this comment, which I think is so like, oh my God, poetic. And it's making me like get all teary. Ron Nook is saying, John's sketches make you miss the partner lover you've never even had. I mean, that's incredible that you can have that reaction to sketches that honestly probably took less than 5 minutes in some cases. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's what sets his work apart from something that's like considered super childish. Although I've looked at illustrations made by like little tiny children and felt that impact, but I do think that there's that extra level of just like real like connection and thought put into it. But I don't know, like maybe I'm just like feeling super lovey-dovey right now. Like, I don't know, but it's interesting because there's this comment from Neil Espinosa that says, I actually feel really isolated looking at his work. I'm like, yeah, sure, they love each other. And I can agree that his drawings are good, but I just don't get the feel. So, I mean, it seems like there's two takes on it. And I guess it's, you know, how it's interesting that someone feels for this like lover partner that they never had. And another person can look at these and understand the love, but not feel that same like, oh my gosh, that I'm feeling right now.
Well, let's actually go back because some of the first images we looked at are not of him and Yoko Ono. Like we have here this guitar player. I don't know. This seems like a self-portrait. I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
This is random people, it seems. And I actually really like this one. This one's fabulous. You said you like this one too.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the BFG kind of vibe. And like, again, the hair and the last person in the line. It's like super funny. I love his play with scale too. Like nothing really makes any logical sense. Like the very first one with the guy on the guitar, I was looking at it just now and I was like, is that Sean? Like, is that his son? Super tiny? Because the Sean was so tiny in the other one. But this actually reminds me a lot of Shel Silverstein. Like I feel like there's kind of a kooky narrative here, like a funny narrative that I could see easily paired with the Shel Silverstein poem about something silly, whereas the other ones felt really like direct in what they were about, which is generally like love and partnership. So yeah.
We have a question from Cerulean. Would you say Lennon's stuff is illustration? It tells a story. Well, what do you think, Deepti?
I definitely feel like his work is illustration. I think it like, I mean, I always like find it hard to like feel the line of like between like a drawing and like an illustration. What is one? What is the other? But I do think that there is a lot of narrative thought being put into all of his work. Like it doesn't just feel like something for the technical aspects similar. Like I feel like Matisse's work is more like a drawing, but I feel like John Lennon's work is an illustration. How about you, Clara?
I mean, I think we could do another stream about that. And we actually do have a stream that talks about the differences between painting and illustration. I don't feel like it's illustration because I feel like the intent behind his work is not to illustrate a newspaper article or illustrate a kid's book. I really feel that he was making it just for his own private life. And intent has a lot to do with illustration. So does context and format. So that's my first take, but oh my goodness, I'm sure we could talk about that for a while. We have an Art Prof share today. An Art Prof share is when one of you makes something in reaction to one of our videos. And so today we are going to look at some sketches by, I'm going to pronounce your name incorrectly, Andrėja. And they did a whole bunch of sketches from my recent anatomy lecture about drawings. And so they're talking about in the statement about slowly losing the fear of making mistakes, trying to make everything look perfect. And what I did in the video was talking about hand structure, simplifying the hand, seeing planes in curvature, and really to see things like veins and wrinkles as being secondary and not that important to the overall shape. And Andrėja also says, I like the idea that the hand can have tension. Looks pretty understandable, but I never really took notice of this detail. So we have this page, we have a couple more. How do you think this is important in terms of studying anatomy, Deepti?
I mean, I think these pages are brilliant and really shows a lot of understanding and practice. And what I love is there's so much energy and movement. Like I almost feel like I can see these hands moving and I can see the tension, like this artist said. But also it's wonderful that I think you're taking notes while you're drawing. Like we spoke about this on our stream yesterday too of another artist, but it's every artist sketches differently. And I think the fact that you're taking notes and you're drawing and you're having a head in there and It's clearly like, oh, you're taking in a lot, and I think it's really brilliant. But I just want to say again, like especially this page that I'm seeing, the animator in me is like, wow, there's so much motion in these hands. Like I can really like feel them. What do you think, Clara?
Well, I'm struck by the fact that they're gestural, because most of these anatomy lectures, they're just about metacarpals here or phalanges here. Like it's not exactly the most romantic lecture that you can give. But what happens is a lot of people, they end up taking notes that look really mechanical and very geometric and very sterile in a way. So what I really like about Andrėja's sketches is that these are talking about structure and they're understanding structure, but in a very loose, very free way. And I think that's hard. I think it's very easy to fall into that trap of those really tight mannequin sketches that you see everybody doing, because it is a lot to absorb. I mean, maybe Michael Fassbender helped. I mean, he helps me all the time. I mean, how can you look at him and think about a mannequin? It's just not going to happen.
Look at him gazing at you in that thumbnail. He knows. There's a mutual appreciation.
So anyway, we're very excited, Andrėja, to see these, because not only are we seeing you learn and gain that knowledge, but we're really seeing you apply that knowledge. Like you're not just copying my slides. You really are interpreting as you learn. And I think that's absolutely wonderful to see. So if you guys would like to get a YouTube shout out on one of our videos, just go to artprof.org, click on tutorials and project ideas. You will see there's a purple button that says submit your ArtProf share. And this is an upload form. You guys can submit your stuff, show us, because we would love to see what you guys are up to. You can also, if you want, tag us on Instagram, use ArtProf Share. We love sharing what you guys are making in our Instagram stories. And ArtProf has a podcast. It's available on Spotify, also on iTunes. We would love it for you guys to leave us a rating and a review. And please join us in a few minutes in the ArtProf Discord. We will be in the post live streams channel. The invite link is in the video description below. And subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the ArtProf family. And I just want to give a quick shout out because Andrėja is here with us. We're so excited. I'm so glad you got to watch that live. It's so cool to have you here. And thank you to our top Patreon supporters for helping us out. Thank you to everybody in the chat for participating in this critique, giving us all your comments and interpretations. You guys make the discussion so rich and so much fun. Everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.